Yeah, well, welcome back, everybody. This is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show with your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo, coming to you from two extreme opposites of the country. And it's Tuesday night. What's going on?
Coming down from the weekend, I got just on the outside chance that they may be listening. I got Christmas presents finished finally, and I'm a happy guy. I actually finished early, and I'm not going to be out there on Christmas Eve with a notebook fanning a piece hoping the finish will dry. It's there, everything's done and more or less wrapped, but feels good. And now for the last 2 days, I haven't known what the heck to do. So I've been doing a lot of admin stuff, which I really, really, really let go. So,
Well, I spent
uh-oh,
my
uh-oh.
time editing a I had a 4 hour, which I told you before in the thing, in the green room. I had a 4 hour sit down conversation videoed with my two cousins from Spain, and they let loose on I whittled it down to 20 minutes or less, something like that. And I
Mhm.
made a video, and I even translated the words so I can have it in English and Spanish. And I'd spent quite a couple of days just trying to get that together, but I've conserved that conversation, and in it we share a lot of nice things that would have probably been lost if it lost if not shared in that special in that unique moment that we did. So I did that. It's really taken a toll on me because there's a lot of like
Yeah.
translating to do. Oh my goodness, dude, it was
So,
savage.
so you did 4 hours, right?
Of talking, yeah.
And you whittled that down to, you said, about 20 minutes roughly.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Because I mean, everything has got to be good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few things. Oh, gee, I don't know what to talk about. What do you think? And things like that. I'm sure there was a little bit of that you could take out. But how do you take 4 hours and condense it down to 20 minutes? That's wow.
Some stuff was personal inside baseball that was too personal,
Okay.
so that stuff I took out. Other stuff was when I talk, I don't know if other people do. I know some other people do it, but I will repeat sometimes the same phrase a few times, and that's a product of the natural habits of speech patterns. It's not like listening to a audiobook
Yeah.
where you get the sentence once and then you move on. So in normal conversation, like I'm about to repeat everything I just said right now as an
Yeah.
example. So that's a thing. So you can whittle it down like that too. And then um the chronological order of how you want things, you can
Sure.
also snuff out little clips here and there, because in reality, if you think about it, a movie that we watch, if you think about all the work they leave on the cutting room floor, or like audio, like
Hmm.
songs that you don't you get the best whittled down version into a 2 hour movie or 2 minute song.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just thinking back to when we were doing the audio side of this podcast here. We would sit and talk, you and I, on a topic for an hour and a half. And then we would whittle that down to about an hour.
That's right.
Now, a lot of that was gaps in conversation. In my audio editing software, there's a little trick called truncate silence.
Hmm.
And you select the whole audio file, and every bit of silence under a half second long, it truncated it down to where that bit of silence was a half a second long. And that's enough of a break in natural conversation to where it still sounds natural. It doesn't sound like you're going on and on and on.
That's right.
There's a little bit of a pause there. And that would usually take 4 or 5 minutes out of the audio, just that. Then I was the kind of person that would go in and take all the long or or whatever. And that would take about 10, 15 minutes out of it sometimes.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Yeah,
you
you can
know,
get it shortened up by doing
mhm,
those things and make it palatable as much as can be done. But it's sort of the project where it's meaningful in order to create it. You're acquiring a moment that's perpetually captured, as we all know with YouTube videos and stuff. But
right.
and it can be used for reference in the future beyond
Sure.
the the moment. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's that's what I did, and it really took its toll. Like I'm exhausted, dude.
I
Um,
know the feeling. I know the feeling. There is a lot to be said for automatic translation services as well. Because, like, when you took that 20 minutes, you could upload it to your YouTube channel unlisted. And YouTube will automatically, YouTube goes through every video and they put up automatic closed captions if you turn it on. You have to turn it on, and it will do automatic closed captions in what you just tell it what language it's in.
the
It's
problem is, Mark,
it's
with
pretty good at figuring out what it is, but
the
it's
problem
not always.
no, but the problem is with this. I thought of that because you did tell me about it.
Hmm.
Um, but the problem with this is that they're speaking Spanish,
Hmm.
and there's two of them plus me, and sometimes the voices overlap. And either way, I was going to have to go over the material piece
Yeah,
by piece. So I figured um, I'm going to have to go over the material piece by piece. So I might as
yeah,
well do it one time the first time, because it's that important in this scenario.
yeah,
If you miss a word on a sort of like let's say a woodworking or some sort of YouTube video that you're doing, but you get the gist of it,
hmm,
it's done its job, but you don't really know what's going on. Like so I opted for manually doing it because of those, and even so, I had to shortcut some of
that's
the things that they said.
yeah,
So
that's that
they're
that
going
that's a lot of
on,
work.
yeah. So they'll go on for a bit, and I'll just give the gist of what they're saying
Yeah,
in order to round the bases. Because if not, it would be like writing a book. Just people talk like us right now. If we were to take all the words that we use after the show and run it through a processor, we've written a small book.
yes, yes. And I do this on every video I edit. What I do is I post it and it's up as unlisted, and then it it takes it about an hour. Then the YouTube's closed captions are done. Well, then you can go in and you can download those captions. And that's what I do. I download them and I open them up in the word processor. And for a 1 hour video, let's say, it can be 60 pages. And I go through and I spell check and do the right punctuation and everything on those 60 pages. Takes about an hour. Then I re-upload them onto YouTube, and um, it shows that I have edited. Those are the actual closed captions, and it's not going to use the automatic closed captions anymore.
Yeah,
Then I go through and I adjust the timing so that as I'm saying something on the screen, it's saying it in text down below. And it's
yeah,
not like a minute before I actually say it or something like that.
yeah. That's right.
And then I can, with 5 clicks, I can translate it into, I don't remember how many languages they offer, but I translate it into 11 other languages. And then I use Google Translate to translate the title and description. So all of that, everything all total takes about 4 hours to 5 hours to do.
Yeah,
So I know exactly what you're talking about. Now,
yeah. It's a lot of work.
do you find, or did you find that there were some things they said that just didn't translate into English very well at all? It was
Yeah,
hard
the
to convey a
order.
concept.
Yeah, the order of what you think of in English to speak a sentence in some fair amount of the time, at certain intervals in a conversation in English, there are sentences within it that in Spanish would be placed at the halfway point, the connecting word, you'd have to rearrange it. But
Mhm.
once you rearrange the latter half to go in the front and the front to go in the back, in order to develop the idea in Spanish using that same English sentence, by switching that, you've you need to alter a few of the beginning words and ending words of your translation in order to fit. So it becomes an ordeal, even though it's something simple. Once you multiply across many paragraphs,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
becomes a thing.
yeah. Now I've
Yeah.
I've heard, and I don't know it, and this is good to talk to somebody who speaks English and Spanish. I have heard that Spanish is technically a very simple, direct language. That the ideas and the concept are very simple and they're very direct. Whereas English, we tend to kind of waltz around certain things because we have so many words for the same thing.
No, there's many words for the same thing in Spanish. Not that I'm an expert in Spanish.
Mhm.
The only major problem I see is the which we've talked about in the past is colloquialisms that are used in English do not translate well, and vice versa.
Yeah,
So something that is an obvious giveaway in an English phrase, because it's something to do with a movie cue that we're
mhm.
all familiar with due to our cultural
Yeah,
connectivity, would not translate well. It will be a literal
yes,
unraveling of an idea that they won't know how to place, and
yeah,
vice versa.
yeah.
So it's in those moments that you can also have a problem, you
It,
know.
and just for the folks out here in the chat, if you ever want to really get into and analyze how you speak, um, shoot a little video of yourself. Just, I mean, think of something that you want to talk to somebody about. You want to show them how to sharpen a pencil. Just describe how to sharpen a pencil, but record yourself doing it, put it up on YouTube, and then listen to it and watch it. Then take those automatic closed captions and go back and edit it. And you will find little cues that you do, little things that you do that it bugged the hell out of me. I've discovered that my big thing is saying the word now. Now I'm going to go do this. And now I'm going to do that. Now we need to do this. And I really had to analyze it and work on stop saying that, because in some cultures, in some other languages, that means do this immediately.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that here.
Yeah,
There's some subtleties,
there is.
and there are some Americanisms that get thrown in there. For instance, you were talking about just a minute ago, um, things that make sense to us that don't make sense outside of the US, like the phrase from out of left field. Well, that makes perfect sense to us because even if we don't like baseball, we kind of have some sense of that's kind of what it means and that's what a reference is. But to
You don't have
somebody,
to know, the origin of the saying if
yeah,
you're in America,
uh-huh,
because it's used so much within other sentences that everybody roughly knows what it means,
right.
or the intention.
But to somebody in Vietnam, they don't have they have no concept of what I'm talking about. Or somebody in well, even in the UK, English speaking, it doesn't even have to be a foreign language.
It's
Um,
kind of a similar thing, the cultural memory, as me growing up. Although Elvis was still quite alive
mhm.
for most of the decade, first decade of my, or half the decade roughly. Um, my parents didn't turn on Elvis Presley, but I had cultural references growing up where I could do the what
Uh-huh.
because it's so
Thank you very much.
right. Not to mention, I didn't even connect the fact that my friends here in the neighborhood, they were huge Elvis fans,
Mhm.
and I didn't make the connection with the until a little bit later, because You go into their house, and their whole house was Elvis regalia, their telephone coverings, their wallpaper, just everything was like the whole. I don't know if you ever met people in your growing up where they were such Elvis fans that like they had like the
The black
velvet.
velvet painting, yes.
It looked like it looked like, what do you call it, like like it almost looked, if you take away the cultural thing, it looked like some sort of ancient Indian shrine
Yeah,
or
a
Buddhist
temple.
temple
Yeah, a temple to Saint Elvis.
is what it looked like. And I would walk in and it would be like, wow, isn't this like there's a theme here, but I couldn't quite place it. But still, the was something that growing up you caught, even if it wasn't our era. It's such an American installment that, so it's similar with words and phrases and such.
I just had this mental image of, a group of 100 Gregorian monks.
Dressed as Elvis.
No, doing "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," you know, in Gregorian chant. So, oh, sorry, that's what it's like to be me. This is my brain on Mark.
Oh yeah, that's the
But
story
yeah,
though.
but it is the story. I mean, we have so many cultural references that we don't even think about, but make absolutely zero sense outside of the U.S. Especially to somebody that speaks a different language. From from what field on the left? I don't understand. You
Yeah.
know.
And by the way, we have talked about it before, but there are American sayings that are going a bit too much in the past that people today would start to miss. Things that have fallen out of favor, but you might capture in some phrase or saying, every like stuff from the 30s and 20s,
Mm-hmm.
um, still get thrown around, but people, you can start to see people not quite sure how to place it.
Yeah, there are a lot of those, but there are some that are old and ancient. Well,
That
in
remain.
American terms, that remain. We say we say well, I didn't shoot any film of this, but I what I did was I nailed these two things together. We have people of voting age who have never seen film, but we still say that. Or, I'm going to go tape this. Well, you haven't put a tape into anything, but we still use that to mean I'm going to record this or I'm going to shoot some video.
Yeah,
But we still use it even though we don't actually mean what we're saying.
that is true.
You know, we but yeah, there are a bunch of things. Like I said one the other day, I said drop a dime. You and I both know what that means, and we
Mm,
both know what that's in reference to.
yeah,
Putting the dime in the payphone to call and talk about somebody or to tell on somebody, report them to the cops. That's what that came from.
or you're gonna say, look, I have to drop a dime for a second. It could it could be everything that you just said. It could be you just have to make a call without the extra added baggage. It could be
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things, but the dime thing and drop the dime
Mm-hmm.
means I'm heading towards the payphone or any phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you're about to go communicate something that just, you know.
Yeah, back in the day, to drop a dime meant squeal on somebody, to go
Well, yeah,
tell on them. That's
yep,
that's what it was used for. But
yeah.
then it kind of morphed into other things. But people don't uh,
Well,
people
yeah.
don't get
Well,
it.
you don't think through
Yeah,
the reason you use every word in a sentence when you do. You just pick out words that fit the
yeah,
narrative that you're trying to go with, and the
yeah.
little pieces that construct that sentence are
Hmm.
usually more complex than just the sentence as a whole, but we
Yeah.
use it to get our message across in a shorthand sort of way.
And it
And
is a
some,
generational thing too, because I mean, some of these people out in the chat here have never put a nickel on the tone arm of a record player to keep the needle from skipping, and it shows. So,
well, talking about language, Do you know when Spanish people became Spanish? Because when did Spanish even begin?
The language, the country,
All
or
of it, just in a
well,
general,
I
like in a
know
rough
it.
sense.
I know it was a collection of city states.
And what were they before they were Spanish?
It
Because
was a
they
it
had to
was a
be something else.
well, they were a collection of city states, weren't they? Regional areas like you had Catalan, you had you had not Cumbria. That's a few miles away. The area up there around Santander. Uh,
It was Castilian, but Castilian was Spanish. But what was
no,
it
no, 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 no,
before?
no.
What did people
What
speak?
is that region called?
Cantabria.
Cantabria. That's the one that I was
But
trying to think of.
broadly, it was considered the realm of Asturias.
Okay,
Broadly
that I
speaking,
didn't know. I didn't know anything about that.
well, even in that era,
Hmm.
it was still sort of Spanish what they were using, but it came from the Roman occupation of that land. The people before that, the people of that land, me, as a derivative of that, and other people from the broader Spanish world, um, like back then before
Hmm.
Roman times, there was no such thing. That was an introduction of the Latin, which today we call, well, we don't, but like in the Americas, we would identify people as Latino or
Hmm.
Hispanic. It comes from the Latin because that was the
Hmm.
language family that was introduced from the Romans.
Right.
But before that, what the heck was going on? Well, I mentioned this since we're talking about language, because I saw a lecture on the original Iberian language that
Hmm.
was there, which was an Indo-European language. This is what we
Hmm.
would have been speaking, which
Hmm.
was a family of the larger Indo-European family that spread throughout Europe, that later became lost or mixed in small ways,
Hmm.
um, into the broader society, today's languages. So we have little traces of it across the world, Europe and whatnot. But the reason I say there's a lecture where to this day they have not been able to have the Rosetta Stone translation,
Hmm.
and the language is called Iberian. It's
Hmm.
not Spanish. It has nothing to do with the Romans. It has nothing. It has to do with just simply European, prehistory European stuff, right? Pre-Roman, pre-written history
Hmm.
that we could chew on today
Now,
as an example. But what it was it had these Phoenician type, which we had discussed.
I was just gonna ask if it had a written language because some of them did not have a written language.
They have tablets that
Okay.
they find scattered and monolithic things, just like you'd find in other parts of Europe, um, with writings. But the problem is that they can't translate. They've been able to translate names of people,
Hmm.
but in the lecture he explains, but now we have a problem because we don't have an alphabet that we can concretely say, so they can't read it, but they can read little pieces due to other circumstances I forget now. But the point is that it looked like runes.
Hmm.
It looked like little lines, runes. It looked like that.
Well,
And what it was that, they can say certain people's names, but the problem is that they don't know. In some cases there's like a letter change, a
hmm.
little like line cut or whatnot, that could identify some of the gods that they worship. And so they can tell it's a name, but sometimes they don't know if it's, what are they talking about, a god, or are they talking about just a regular person, or on a
Hmm.
gravestone? Are
Yeah.
they just talking about the person that dug the grave, or is it the person that died? And just
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff. They don't. There's no translation.
Do they know if it was a character based language, like our language are all character based, with our alphabet,
Our
or
alphabet
was it
is our
or
alphabet
was
is
it
Latin.
or was it a pictograph based? like
No,
say Chinese or Korean or
no,
Japanese? Okay,
no.
so
It was like
it was like
runes.
runes. Okay, okay,
But our language, I know that
hmm
we've had this discussion in various attempts throughout the
sure.
thing. Our language is completely written from beginning to end. Western Europe, most of Europe, except for Russia, that writes sort of with that derivative
With
of Greek,
Cyrillic, yeah.
um, is all written in Latin,
hmm
and it's so hard for people to digest it due to just broadly speaking, because the concept of Latin has a place name, like we were talking earlier, of things that we associations and whatnot. But
hmm
really, Latin was everything for Europe.
hmm
And when I mean everything, I mean just about everything, because it was how religion was transported from every corner
Yeah.
of the
Well,
land,
and science.
and how science was
hmm
transported. It was the the language that was used in order to like surrender and make treaties.
hmm
It was everything across, what is France today,
Yeah.
which were the early ones that started to solidify dominion after
Yep.
the Romans fell. One of
Well,
the
you were not considered a scholar if you didn't know how to read and write either Latin, Greek, or both.
so well, yeah, but before all that, there was none of that.
No.
And it was Indo-European people. So in Iberia, there was that language that I just wanted to share with you guys, and but there was a secondary,
hmm
because there were many smaller stuff, but there were
hmm
two. There were those people, those Iberian people,
hmm
and then there were the Celtic people.
hmm
The Celtic people, a lot of people associate Celtic with, actually, it ties in perfect. This is what I wanted to share, that I said that is a little bit funky or complicated, but the Celtic people, we associate it with Ireland,
hmm
with
And
Scotland
Scotland.
to a
Yeah.
degree. We connect it to that. Um, and although that's true, in as much as it is true, that's not the story. That's not the full story by
Right. I was
any
going to
stretch of
say
the
it's not the whole
imagination.
story. Yeah.
Um, Celtic, you can pretty much stamp everybody in Europe. Pretty much stamp everybody in Europe. Its influence and its people,
hmm
because it's not a race-based movement of people
hmm
by any stretch of the imagination. It's more a cultural, which you can see in the art and weaponry and stuff like that, plus the language. So
hmm
if you look at the ancient, the Irish, their
hmm
Gaelic and whatnot, and you compare it to Spanish,
hmm
even though Spanish came afterwards, you can see words literally spelling out phonetically the same meaning
hmm
and um, letters and whatnot, let's say, for
Yeah.
us today. So you can see there's a broad connection across the land throughout
Right.
Europe. But um, so yeah, so Celtic can be found in Central Europe, in
hmm
Eastern Europe, in Southern Europe, obviously in Northern Europe, because we're all
Um,
familiar with it. Yeah.
especially in and around the mountains, there around the Alps, there towards France, Spain, Italy.
Yeah.
The huge concentration of Celts there.
But it's not evident to,
Huge
but
concentration.
it was never evident to me, well, until I started studying this, but
Yeah.
I never grew up thinking that was evident to me. It was just an Irish thing, as a matter
Yeah.
of course, and
Well,
that was it.
that's basically what folks are told. When
Right.
you start talking about Celts, you are immediately your brain goes to Ireland and Scotland because
Mhm.
that's the association that is made.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not the full story by any stretch.
Mm-mm.
But there was in the 19th century a
Mhm.
revival that occurred,
Mhm.
and this has been documented, but it's not talked about much in um, regular conversation, but there's plenty of information on it, where there was a revival of sorts, and then you get a lot of the iconic things that we're accustomed to, that we think are things that run into the distant past. And although they do in a sense, in a real sense, they do run into the distant past, but there was a revival that stamped a lot of the standards that we think about now for Celtic today is actually the efforts of a revival to sort of solidify a history, but that wasn't apparent to people at the time. In those, they just did things. It's like, let's say, in our culture, this is a little example. There's probably many other, but a little example. Every New Year's, we would throw out a bucket of water out in the street and eat 12 grapes.
Okay.
We just did that. My parents knew what it was about, but by the time I'm doing it, I'm like, this is just a tradition. And until I looked into it, now I know that, it stems from Spain, and this is what people did. But where was the origin of that? I mean, there's a trail that you can trace back. So enough time passes by, people don't know what the heck, why they're doing that, or thinking or believing the things that they believe.
Let's look back to Halloween and taking a pumpkin and carving out the top, scoop it all out, carve a face in it, put a candle in it, and set it on the front porch. Why do we do that? We don't know why we do that. We just know that we saw it when we were kids, and our parents eventually trusted us with a knife to be able to cut out our own little pumpkins, and we keep doing it.
That's right.
You know, if you take pie out of the equation, I would say probably 90% of the people in North America have never eaten pumpkin other than in pie. It's just a squash, just like any other type of a winter squash, basically.
Yeah.
But it's, we're not looking, where did that come from? How did that get started? That kind of thing. Yeah. You're 6 years old. You don't care. Yeah. So.
So with that, just the running through the course of the situation. So I ran into quite the dilemma. Well, not my dilemma, but just one that I ran into that I found quite interesting and a teachable moment and stuff. So get this. And obviously this is my interpretation of my thoughts, but I'll lay the groundwork for it and see what you think. 2 or 3 years ago, there was a big study done. And what they do is, just for everybody, they have all these professors and whatnot from universities, and they get funding and whatnot in order to embark on studies. And they do it for all sorts of things, from, just like drugs, and they'll do it for like if they find a belt in some sort of remote cave, they'll do a study on that belt to find everything there is about it. Just papers and studies that we see in this and that. This study was about the Scandinavian people and the Vikings.
Okay.
Now, these were mostly Scandinavian people that were doing the studies, and other people from Cambridge and other universities and stuff. And they group up they group up photographers, historians, and DNA experts and stuff. They dug up like 250 graves that they had found, and other graves and whatnot. They extracted the DNA. They did this all 3 years ago. And they went through their work, and they got their work done, and they published it. It got peer reviewed and the whole 9 yards. And they have I have the paper. I downloaded it because it's super interesting, but there's a curious twist to it. So we all know that when people people don't have to be threatened physically to feel threatened and react in a defensive manner or aggressive manner. Not only can somebody attack you physically, at which point you're going to defend yourself, but people can attack your reality, your cultural reality. That's how come people get offended and stuff. When we see people offended out there, or the vice versa, attack and back and forth, is that there are attacks that aren't physical, but they're attacking the culture, which we hold dear, which we feel the need to protect at a verbal, intellectual level, cultural level. And so the Scandinavians feel the same thing about Vikings. Because they identify as such, as the derivative of, and all these things. And of course, bold in this thing. some people are more open to variations. Like if they say, "Well, did you know that this happened?" and it goes, it flies in the face of what you hold true to yourself,
Yeah.
and you take it in stride because it's just information and whatnot. And other people are like, "What? We're going to blows for this one, buddy."
Yeah.
So there's all these, and we all participate to one degree or the other in this sort of thing because we're human beings and we
Mhm.
do hold each other as a glue through culture. It's a very important part of, I mean, we're social creatures.
Mhm.
Even though you may be a caveman at one degree or another, we're still social creatures and we hold things dear on that level. Well, anyways, the study found that Vikings, up to 50% of them back then
Mhm.
were half, up to half, Southern European and not blonde.
Mhm.
Not blonde, they had blonde, but they had a lot of Southern European people in their
Okay.
mix. And there is this history of these racial norms that are, I guess you'd call them the undertow of the water under the river, the icy
Mhm.
river, the icy river of the north, where people have very delineated ideas on these concepts. And this whole DNA thing
Mhm.
is changing the concept. It's ruining certain concepts,
Mhm.
and people are, I've noticed a lot of people ignore it, that do come face to face with certain things. And the main gist of it is that people are a blend of each other that have
Right.
been constantly mixing eternally, um
All the way back. Yeah.
notwithstanding whatever physical differences people see, which is broad, a very striking thing that people experience. But it has political things associated with it,
Mhm.
because it tampers with our norms, politically speaking, culturally speaking, just all these things. And the
Right.
people of Scandinavia, most of them are like, okay, well, that's the information, but there's many, or a good amount, that are like, whoa, what? No, this can't be. So they're trying to work the way around, but it, it's it's usually a lack of understanding the passage. We're talking about thousands of years,
Yeah.
people coming in, mixing. And so there was an interview. Well, two things. One guy was part of the team,
Mhm.
and he's from Norway,
Mhm.
and he's totally into like Vikings. Well, he's a historian,
Mhm.
and he's into Vikings because that's his history.
Mhm.
The problem is this: that is the team basically discovered that what we can call Viking were a mix of people, and they
Mhm.
traveled all across Europe, all over the
Yeah.
world, and they married in and then sometimes brought back.
Mhm.
And but there was also Southern European extraction before the Viking raids
Yeah.
amongst them. Because the theme is that everybody's freaking mixed. Like
Mhm.
the idea of the but and this study is one of many that continue to revive that understanding. But the thing is that this guy said, "Well, wait a second, I don't, I disagree with this," and he went on a show of another guy, a British guy,
Mhm.
and the British guy is quite the Anglophone, um, and what
I
he does is he's not completely what you'd call like racist intent, but what he does is he covers the un the information that's not particularly cool to the theme that he wants to portray, and he
Yeah.
accentuates the stuff that is cool, so the community at large don't like him
Mhm.
because he's covering a little bit of the things that are inconsistent to his narrative
Sure.
and accentuate. And the reason behind that is because he has a worldview that he wants to unify. I mean, there's ideas behind it. It doesn't have to necessarily be racist, and that word's thrown around a lot.
Mhm.
But these people are professionals, and they don't want the. Well, this guy went on his show, and then he got kicked out of the team for the next big project, which is another huge thing across Europe.
Just for going on this guy's show or for something he said on the show?
Well, one, for going on his show, being associated with him, and plus being associated to the team of professionals that actually publish in universities
Mhm.
and for what he said that he differed um, with the paper. Like he went out of his way instead of doing it through the right line. He could have screwed a whole bunch of people. Let's say,
Yeah.
because he's part of a team, and he says, "Well, I don't like this." And the thing he didn't like was that they came to the conclusion, to one degree or the other. Um, this part I didn't go through much,
Mhm.
but that the Vikings were coastal,
Mhm.
and in the inland people, it's something to. They were just like farmer people.
Mhm.
Like they have nothing to do in terms of the composition of what these other people were. So, in a roundabout way, what I took from it, the offense,
Mhm.
is that he's suggesting that Scandinavian folks inland
Mhm.
were simply just like peasantry or something like that, and the Vikings. I guess that's it. It was trying to rob him in his mind of
Of
his
his
Viking,
culture.
of his culture, and so he took offense
Yeah.
to that, and he tried to. Now he's not a nasty guy. This is a
Mhm.
guy that
Sure.
Um, but there was all this problem, and so he got fired and this and that. And after the fact, he has become a little bit sort of like, like
More militant.
yeah, he's a little bit hurt about it
Mhm.
and
Well,
stuff. And well, let me just conclude with this bit. Long story short, he did he did on his channel a video where he interviews an honest to goodness um, geneticist guy that's very famous because he's done a lot of projects and stuff. And I think when they did their thing, he tried. It was like trying to tamp down his offense to the intellectual community or whatever by
mhm.
having this guy on, and this guy came on and laid out a series of explanations that were tactful,
Mhm.
well presented. So it made him and the professor obviously look good and stuff in order to soften the blow of all the crap. So long story short, it was war because of an offense towards the speech. I don't know that the publication is saying that necessarily. I think
Well,
that it's just saying that there was this Southern European mixture in there due to just the historical thing that everybody
right.
comes from a nucleus of an origin, but it's offensive to a lot of people because it's what they hold true.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And this is why I try to break in, because
I'm sorry.
that's a lot of stuff to unpack.
Yeah, I know.
But
I told you
here's
the whole
something.
story.
Well, here's something else to throw into the mix, because Dan is right about this. Nobody was in Finland or north of Ohio in the US about 12,000 years ago, because it was all under glaciers.
Mhm.
So to say that there is evidence of Southern European in there, you said what, about 40 to 50%, somewhere in that
Yeah,
neighborhood?
up to 50% of
Makes
their composition.
makes perfect sense, because those people are, for the most part, all new people
Yeah,
from about 12,000 years ago or 11,000 years ago. You know, so there was nobody up there. So folks started migrating further up north, and there you go. So the fact that there are Southern Europeans in that mix shouldn't be that big of a surprise.
that makes sense.
Um, he goes on to say Vikings are a new people. Now we make modern furniture. Soon space Vikings. Yeah, well, true. You know.
But in it, Mark, so that
Mhm.
makes sense what Harju laid out, or what you both laid out. Because at one point, I guess it would have been a frozen tundra that would not be hospitable for folks. So folks were gathered and whatnot. But on the other side, we have this modern, modern in a general sense, but
Yes.
1900s on concept of race that didn't exist back before that at all. It really it didn't. I mean, there were differences people acknowledged, but um, it wasn't what the construction that occurred in order to historically go through, and give people hierarchical in the sense that it occurred in the 19th and 20th
Well,
early 20th
it
century.
was before that as well. There was some before that. I mean, in the 16th and 17th century, but it was people of differences were seen more as curiosities.
No, well, let me correct it then. So we are the inheritors,
Hmm.
of course, of everything,
Sure.
but in the forgotten memory recently of
Hmm.
a certain concept of my people, your people, and this and that, in
Hmm.
terms of in the concept of race, where there's this, because I mean, if you think Viking, I
Yeah.
mean, you would try to consider it quite the
Well,
solid, unified, one specific, not
yes.
tarnished by anything whatsoever, and it's this thing, and that's not the case, and
No.
that and that is an offense
Mhm.
to what people have been believing for hundreds of years now.
Right.
Um,
And that's a fairly modern construct as well.
right. So in terms of that,
In the Western world, it's a fairly modern construct.
yeah,
You get
and
into Asia, that goes back several thousand years. The Chinese have always believed that they were superior to everyone else on Earth, and
yeah, but we're
everyone
talking
else on
about
Earth is a barbarian. But
well, yeah, but we're talking
yes,
about our part of the world here,
right, exactly. We're talking about in Western
and it wasn't, and
civilization. It's a fairly new man-made construct.
yeah, well, look, it is true also what you're saying. So in terms of, so like
Hmm.
the Greek had their slavery, but slaves weren't of a race. You could have a slave and
Yes,
they were probably a cousin of yours, and they're
yes.
your slave, because the concept wasn't based on, so look, even in Rome there was tons of but in Rome a slave could leave the shackles of his set in life by obtaining a privilege through war or through other means, and people, go ahead,
And they could buy their freedom.
and they could buy their freedom, and people from other parts not nested in, let's say, Rome proper,
Hmm.
could rise to the heights of emperor. Some of the emperors were African,
Hmm.
some of the emperors were Iberian,
Hmm.
some of the emperors were from different parts of what Europe is today,
Hmm.
so they had this mobility possibility, even though you could imagine
Hmm.
it had to be I mean, it had to be a nightmare, but the point is this, that there was mobility. This concept of what we have is more recent memory, or what we
Right.
have in the forgotten, or the recent memory but forgotten, not self-experienced
Hmm.
memory, is this whole idea that developed in our time. But besides that, um along with that comes the idea that, well, look, we're a specific people that is separate from other people and whatnot, and that's just not, it's not really the case. um
There are separate
Strongly so.
cultures. There are separate cultures, but not
Yeah.
necessarily separate people.
Yeah, and yet
You know,
at the same time they are, because if you consider culture and you
to,
consider people marrying in a group in a village for
hmm,
hundreds and hundreds of years, in
yeah.
essence, that's not nothing. That's a freaking
No,
that.
you're absolutely right,
So there's,
but it's still fairly recent. It's still a fairly recent thing.
yeah, the trick is with all this is that everybody's sharing the same original DNA
Hmm.
letters and combinations that have been chopped up,
Hmm.
and like a puzzle, each region is putting them together in their own way, because it gets mixed every time people are born. You're getting little pieces realigned, and those letter sequences which denote commonality get chopped up in unique ways in different places.
Yep.
And so when people look at it, you could say, oh, well, this combination here comes from, but in reality all combinations come from a source combination according to what they say.
Yeah.
And I believe it. I think that that's reasonable
Well, that's where the
according to the
evidence
science.
leads. That's where the evidence leads, and you have to follow the evidence. But every time they find a piece of evidence, they discover more questions. And that's one of the things I've heard that said several times by several different anthropologists. Um, DNA analyst, uh, expert speaker on a lot of these subjects, is that
Yeah.
every time they find something, it makes them mad because it opens the door for more questions.
It opens the door for more questions. It gets more complicated. And by
Yeah.
the way, so there is something to be said, because at the same, so the threat is also that, if we don't have this uniqueness, then our culture, it's a threat to our culture and whatnot. And
I,
there's modern political. So if it's always been, they just discovered the information through study, and it's
mhm.
always been like that, it's not really a historical change. It's just simply you're learning something that was a
Right.
truism that we didn't have the tools to operate under because
Yeah.
we were. But
Well, you
the
also have
worry,
to remember that a lot of what we're told as solid fact when there's no evidence to support that fact. I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't matter if you learned this from the kid next door, doesn't matter if you learned it from your mom and dad or if you learned it in school. They're
yeah,
going by the information they have at the time. And then when something new comes along, they either have to change that information, add more information to it, or completely throw it out the window
yeah,
because
yeah,
science changes, technology changes, and our understanding changes.
yeah,
So we have to be fluid. We have to be flexible because if we're not, we're lying to ourselves. Hell, even medical students are taught that by the time they get out of pre med and get into residency, half of what they have learned will have been discovered to be totally false or obsolete.
yeah. But although you can reason that out,
Mm-hmm.
in the context of us observing it, a
Mm-hmm.
culture throughout decades and centuries is not necessarily. I mean,
Well,
they're thinking they're not scrutinizing, um and justifying thing. They're just part of a culture, and
okay.
that's their identity. So they're not thinking in terms of like, well, things might change here, folks. They're thinking, hey, we're freaking Vikings, or
Well,
descendants of Vikings, and that informs, that's an inform it informs them. And I don't think that it changes. Well, I don't know, because it's not like I saw,
it's
I
not my
read through a
culture. Yeah.
lot, but maybe, no, I'm saying that I don't know how much it would affect or not either way, according to what I read.
Mhm.
um the fact that they can claim, um very solidly, that they are,
Well,
the descendants of the Vikings, regardless. It just, for some people, the intrusion
mhm.
means a
Into
threat.
that dream. Yes. And I get that. I get that. Um, because you've lived your entire life under one set of, well, like you said, under one reality. And now here comes
Yeah,
something that's going to change a part of that. But let me ask you this about that.
yeah.
Does that change the, let's go with these were people from Norway. Does that change the Norwegian culture? I don't think it changes it at all.
It does change something, though.
It may change the way you look at it, but I think they're still going to speak the same language. They're still going to have the same customs. They're still
Yeah,
going to have the same TV programs. They gotta have the same. They're still going to have the same, newscast at the same hour of the day. Daily life, I don't think, is going to change much at all. They're still going to have their foods. They're still going to have their music. Still going to have their celebrations and their holidays. I
yeah.
don't know that it's going to change their culture much at all.
It is going to change one thing as well, though, and that
Mhm.
is, how they qualify other people not part of them. Now they
Well,
have to,
it may be.
yeah, because
That
now they
may
have
very
to,
well be.
yeah, because if the little part of them is a little part of you, and a little part of you is a little part of them,
Hmm.
then that implies rights or shared something.
Yep, still got to go sauna. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that it's the sharing of the dream, like you said earlier.
uh, it- and
You know,
I don't know, we're in kind of a weird position because there are people who would argue that America's too young of a country. We don't have a culture. And to them, I say, okay, well, What about the indigenous people that were here long before Europeans came? You know, um, how about Lakota Sioux? I mean, they were here for thousands of years before the Europeans came along. How about the Navajo? What about the Chippewa? What about the Cherokee? They don't count. How can you say America hasn't had culture? But that's splitting hairs.
Yeah.
We are the distinct American culture is a we're a mongrel, we're a mutt. We have been basically populated by groups of immigrants who have come here for their own various reasons and more or less assimilated and became what we are now.
Mhm.
And so I don't think there is really anything we can say would be uh, now I'm not talking about a military type invasion, but I don't think that anything can really threaten the American culture because the American culture absorbs other cultures and just blooms and blossoms. I mean, every group, every nationality that comes here just adds to the stew. You know what I mean?
Well, what we are, and I'm just on the fly here.
Hmm.
If I try to unravel it on the fly,
Hmm.
my way of explaining it on the fly would be we're a geographic area
Right.
with everything you just said included, people coming from many places for a few hundred years, strengthened and protected by a base military and political system, um, based on a constitution and the
True.
system of law that we have, which informs the complex variation of cultures into a gelatinous unification. But within that fruit salad, like we saw Billy the other day, Billy did a fruit salad.
Yeah.
Um, there's little pieces of like peach and little pieces of this,
Right.
which congeal
And it
into that
all
big
comes
thing.
together. Yeah.
So maybe if you're a piece of the I guess, what other fruit is there in the fruit salad?
Oh, pineapple.
um, oh, so let's say you're a pineapple in one section covered by jelly. Like, let's
Hmm.
call that California.
Yeah. And
listen,
meanwhile,
listen
back
to
at
what I
the
just
ranch,
said.
and all
California,
you and Florida is the bananas,
yeah.
or the
Let's
mandarin orange sections, whatever. But yeah, that is
well,
the
no,
case.
let me say this. Let me say this. So if you're that, you're not budding with the banana necessarily, but in it, that's funny. But in reality, it's all connected by that jelly, that bone, that pig bone, ground up into
Or
that.
or the whipped cream. if
Well,
you
there's whipped
prefer
cream.
if you prefer that type of a fruit salad. But it is the case. I mean, think of just look at the foods that we eat every day and we don't think twice about them. How many of them came from Germany? How many of
Mhm.
them came from France? How many of them came from Asia? How many of them came from Italy? I mean, Mexico, uh, South America. I mean, everything.
Yeah,
And we think of it as just normal. We're going to have this. Today we're going to have tacos, and tomorrow we'll go get pizza, and then the day after that, let's go over here to the Chinese place.
yeah,
It's normal to us. We love it, and I
yeah.
don't think we would have it any other way.
But
And every time somebody comes in and adds that level of seasoning to, a new level of seasoning,
yeah,
it makes everything better.
but I would also liken America. Not all of Americans. This is just a broad thing, but just a corner slice of a percentile of people.
Mhm.
I would also sum it up as, and this is a little bit on the negative, but it's funny. I think it's you can also like in America to like imagine somebody sitting out on one of those tables next to a restaurant and eating a taco. I know tacos aren't necessarily Mexican at either side, but eating a taco and looking up and saying "frickin' Mexicans" and still eating taco. So we consume from
Yeah.
the intertwined cultures, but we still have strifes. That was just an example. There's many examples. You
Sure.
could be driving down the road and there's like an Amish cart in front of you and you're trying to get somewhere. You're like, frickin' Amish. And yet they form part of the, but so we have a lot of variation within us. So it is kind of like a fruit salad.
Yeah. But I
It's like a
mean,
fruit salad. Oh, goodness gracious. Title of the next video, Fruit Salad America.
the fruit salad experiment. That's basically what we are. I mean,
Yeah.
we're a mutt, and that is the American culture. A
Yeah.
lot of it is based on pop culture, but look at that pop culture. I mean, look at what it is. I mean, you can say, yes, rock and roll is an American music, but where did it come from? Where were its roots? I mean, and we lump everything in together and make everything. I sound like I'm bragging about America. We'll throw Canada in with this as well because they're just as good at it as we are. We take everything that comes in and say, yeah, cool. And you know what? I'm fine with people coming here and doing everything they can to succeed. And if they learn the language, great. If they're like me and have a difficulty learning the language, I'm fine with it because you know what that does? That spawns more industry. That spawns more jobs. And
And you
there
know
are
what?
people out there whose jobs it is to translate for other people. There are television networks, there are news services out there for those people who can't speak the language. I'm all for it.
I'm okay
I
with
don't have
people.
an issue with it.
I'm okay with people coming in too. I'm
Yeah.
okay with them coming in and leaving me alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, we agree, you can't just come waltz in my door, But
Yeah.
hey, America is one of those. It's a polyglot, bastardized country that's accepted wave after wave of immigrants who adds to the pie, becomes part of the American dream, quote unquote.
In a lot of in a larger amount than other countries, than all other countries put together too.
Well, I don't know about all other countries, but I can tell you that
Yeah.
depending upon who you listen to,
Yeah.
we accept anywhere from 850 to 900,000 immigrants a year.
That's more than other
Legal immigrants.
countries.
Okay. Right. Number 2 is Germany, who accepts 350,000. And number 3 is Turkey, that accepts 300,000. So we accept more than double what second and third place accept. Well, no.
Not more than double.
Not quite double. Not quite double.
But the point is that there's all that happening. But within that, you do have. So look, you can't also help. So in terms of the Viking guy, that, and by the way, a lot of people are like, man, he got rode stiff on, hard on that one, because of the association. And then I'm sorry.
You got to be careful about which hill you want to die on, man.
What I noticed about and this guy is a historian guy. This guy, it's not like he's a run of the mill thing, but who's like, this guy went through the fire to do his thing to become what he is. So he's a historian guy and whatever. But at the end of the day, he's a human being.
Sure.
And your title is a very important signature, iconic thing that speaks to your effort and work and knowledge and whatnot. But it doesn't. You could make really crappy decisions at all levels of life.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
You know what I'm saying? So it's so he made a bad, in my opinion, according to what I saw, because I spent a little bit of time in the whole thing because I found it fascinating. He shouldn't have connected necessarily with that guy in public. And not that the guy is outwardly, he's a British guy, and he's a historian himself. It's not like he's outward, but you know how there's a sensitivity towards, and I've picked up on it, by the way. I've picked up on that concept, which I wasn't aware of before, while doing this study of DNA and watching so many different things and doing, I've picked up on it by reading and realizing all these situations where there's always this, I guess you'd call it, we want to protect our dominance in this situation from our
Mhm.
vantage point type of an
Yeah.
idea. And
Yeah.
so people will go to any lengths to protect their identity. And by the
Yes.
way, we would do it too. Remember
Well, I
the other
think it's
day?
a normal human trait.
Remember the other day to put myself on the plate in this one as well, because it's a human trait, like you're saying. Remember the other day we were talking about something or other, and I was explaining that, well, in Cuba X, Y, and Z happened, and this and that, and then you brought in what happened to Germany and whatnot, and this and that. And remember that I immediately went to defend the station, my stations,
Yeah.
immediately went to the defend. Well, where does that come from? Well, it obviously comes from uh, my recent memory of through my parents. But
Mhm.
what is it that I'm doing by saying, well, wait, let me clear something up here, Mark. Wait, let me clear something up. Why is it that I went there? Well, because I'm trying to maintain, and I'm thinking this through now, right?
Mhm.
I'm trying to maintain this this fencing
Mhm.
on these pillars of history that are
Mhm.
true to me and people of Cuban descent and the
Mhm.
story and whatnot. And at the gates are saying, well, wait, let's divert our vision. And so what is that if not another variation of what, and it's totally like people are going to defend, but what is
Defend
it
the
not?
tribe. It's
Right, what it,
defending the tribe. Yeah.
exactly, exactly,
And
exactly.
it's 100% normal. It is 100%
Yeah,
normal. And in fact, I'd have been surprised if you hadn't have.
well,
I wasn't trying to make a correlation or anything like
hmm.
that. I
No,
was
I
just
understood you said it,
Mhm.
but it was enough to say it.
Mhm.
Thinking back on, and I did explain that I wasn't
Yes.
offended, but that I felt that I needed to defend,
Mhm.
the idea. So
Uh-huh.
I did so, but it's not like I was offended. I knew that you weren't coming from a bad place. Like I
Yeah.
explained that, so
Yeah.
I was aware at least that there was not a nastiness, but I felt like, whoa, hold on, let me defend this.
Yeah.
Well, it's totally normal because you got to do. I mean, lest
Well,
someone goes and confuses the issue, which they do. That's the worry that these professors, or let me just get this through. The
yeah.
team that did the experiment, that was the worry with one of their members going and doing an interview with a guy that was iffy
Uh-huh.
and he is slightly, what I said, minimizing information that's slightly not favorable to that sort
His
of.
stand, yeah.
Right. So they saw a threat,
Mhm.
and so they snuffed it out. And the guy, the Norwegian guy in the middle, fell victim to it. And it's like he decided to die on that hill and make that
Yeah.
decision.
Well, this is how you end a career in a 1 hour program.
Oh, oh, dude, yeah,
He's
yeah.
not the first and he will not be the last. He will not be the last. There will
I'm
be
gonna.
other people that do the same thing.
Oh no, of course, because it's a human thing, and sometimes
Mhm.
we have no.
No, I need
We're
to go do
compelled.
this. Well, okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna look for that video where he sits down with the other professor, because they're sitting somewhere in this northern, who knows, Scandinavian place. I don't know exactly.
Mhm.
Maybe it's Denmark, maybe it's some other place. But
Yeah.
they're sitting, and there's this mural in the background, maybe at some restaurant, and they're
Mhm.
sitting outside,
Mhm.
and you have the one professor and himself having the conversation. You can see that they're quite polite, and the
Mhm.
information in there is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And it's well done. It's like a 20-minute thing, and
Mhm.
it's so well done. Like, it's really unfolds really well. I'm gonna try to find it and post it in our page um,
Facebook.
on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Sounds like a winner. Um, Steve Coombs says you're right, Mark. Historically, immigrants to the U.S. assimilate into American culture and become Americans, but in recent history, they've segregated themselves and don't melt into the pot anymore. Um, I don't know. Some of that is true. I don't know how much of it is true. we have out here in the West, we have a very large Asian population out here, and they have always segregated themselves into, I mean, some of the littlest podunk towns at one time had what they called a Chinatown, because that's where all of the Asians, whether they were Chinese or not, would move to, because they were very uncomfortable with Western culture. They
Hmm.
knew their culture, they congregated together, and they stayed in that area. Um, and that's been going on since the 1800s out here in the West, anyway. Um, it was true of various cultures throughout the U.S. history. Um, i- if you go into various regions up in the upper Midwest, you have very large German populations and Dutch populations and Scandinavian populations. Um, Down south was more the Scots Irish and Scottish and Irish. Scots Irish is not Scottish or Irish; it's something else. But anyway,
It's Scottish that moved to Ireland for a short while
mhm,
before they ended up in the United States.
right, they're different groups. But um, and then down in Louisiana, you had Spanish and French, and you had
Which wasn't self-apparent, which wasn't the Spanish part wasn't an obvious, at least for my world. People over there knew,
well,
but we weren't aware of that.
that's because when you hear Louisiana, you hear New Orleans, and all you ever hear about is the French influence
And most of the
or
buildings
the
there,
Creole influence.
most of the buildings there, stamp it
Spanish,
with a, yeah, that whole French
right?
vibe. But you know why it's but you know why
But
it's associated with French?
because we bought it from France.
Well, okay, so yes, that's true. But
Mhm.
I'm saying why we New Orleans and whatnot, why we associate, especially the visuals, because it is French.
Uh-huh.
It's that the Spanish that were there, in order to appease, let's say, for lack of a better word, their building style
Mhm.
was done in French.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't true throughout the whole of it, but
Mhm.
for the main arteries, since the majority of the people there were of French extract,
Mhm.
um, and they were there to govern,
Mhm.
trying to do it as best they could. They tried to work within the system, but they had
Mhm.
problems,
Right.
because the language and all sorts of stuff. But whatever.
But yeah, but my broader point being, though, that we have, since before we ever became the United States, that has been the case, that
Yeah,
populations came from areas from all over the world, and they
yeah,
tended to kind of band together and self-segregate, and
yeah.
eventually some of them would spread out further and
Mhm.
further. I mean, when we look at, I mean, it's weird to say, but you have to be blunt about it. When we look at white folks, we're not looking at how many of them are of German ancestry, how many are of Finnish ancestry,
Yeah.
or from Norway, or from Holland, or France. Pick an area,
All those
you know.
countries.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it is true they have assimilated to become one, and some still do. Others, for their own reasons, either don't or can't. But like my next door neighbor, our first neighbor here, um, he emigrated from Mexico in the 1960s, and his kids were born here, and he spoke good English. His kids spoke perfect English. It was the Spanish they were kind of rough with, because he enforced on them, no, you're in America now, you're going to learn the language, you're going to be an American.
Mm.
Never forget your roots and be proud of your roots, but you're an American.
Mm.
And so I won't say he forced it on him, but he pushed in that direction. And he spoke English with them. He spoke Spanish with his wife. He spoke English to me, but he spoke English with his kids because he wanted to reinforce that you're an American now, you're part of America. I think it doesn't matter to me. If you come here and you don't speak English, fine. There are people out there who will help you and who will guide you. Be careful, because there are also people out there who will scam you. But you are not alone. And I don't think it takes anything away from this quote unquote American experience
But
to
it is a
remain
threat. It is
to
a threat to
I
people.
well, I can see how somebody would perceive it as a threat, but I don't think it is a threat.
No, that it is a threat or not is a separate question. But people do. I mean, I've seen videos where like there's a guy at
Mhm.
a burger joint or a lady, like an old lady,
Mhm.
and I don't know if they're set up or not, but there's plenty of them out there. And I've heard that thing will say, "This is America. You speak English here." And the guy's like, "Lady, I'm talking to my mom in Spanish," and he says it, and she's all like in a rough and stuff, and because it's a threat on a cultural level, um, to some people to one degree or the other. Now, decent, educated people, um, for the most part, are gonna see, like, let's say a Chinese family comes in, you leave them the hell alone. You try to service them as best as possible, but that's as far as you're gonna go with it. That's what
Yeah, you
general
do your job.
educated. That's
Mhm.
what generally educated, decent people do. But there's a
Yeah,
good contingent of people that are stupid,
yeah,
and they think that
that's true.
they are the holders of the torch of America,
Well,
and then only through them can they keep it solidified. And that's not an educated.
no.
You're not going
And
to solve America in a confrontation.
I would go one step further and say that her putting her nose into somebody else's business without being invited is more of a threat than him speaking to his mother in Spanish.
Oh yeah,
I
it's
think
it's
I think
ridiculous.
it just mind your own business, lady. Who the hell do you think you are to demand anything of anybody? You are nobody. You're a number, just like me. You're just another mope hoping they get 50,000 miles out of a set of tires. Who the hell do you think you are to demand somebody else speak another language?
Yeah.
Kiss my hind parts.
Well, there's a video. I don't know if you've run into it, but I have, and I watched it. It was quite the great video
Mhm.
because, see, I don't. So there's injustice in every direction when it
Sure.
comes to people interacting. So there's abuse on people because they're quote unquote not a minority, quote unquote a minority, quote
Mhm.
unquote this thing or that thing. And so I'm not particularly fond of any of it because if they can do it to one group of people based on a group of uh, characteristics, be it cultural or physical or whatever, they
Mhm.
can do it to anybody depending on the circumstance if it suits
Sure.
them. Well, there was a guy, and by the way, I mean, I think that that's the more decent approach to take. But there's a video of a guy. He's a Asian gentleman. He's an American guy,
Mhm.
but he's of Asian ancestry.
Mhm.
And in order to perform his video, he he looked for the most. There's actually a list. I didn't know this until I ran into this. There's actually a list of what's the most racist town in America. Now, I saw that and I was like, "Holy!" There's a list, and so there's a list, Mark, and so well, number one, if you're from that town, that's not a good list to be on because it's just so there's so much baggage with. I mean, obviously, well,
Sure.
he looked for the most racist town, and he packed his friends up in it,
Mhm.
all Asian, and proceeded to go there. He says, "We're gonna check this out. We're gonna see what's what here, folks. Let's go and check it out."
Mhm.
And he drove out to this heartland of America town and whatnot. And the whole video, check this out, from the beginning to the end,
Mhm.
everybody was nothing but nice to them, dude. Everywhere they would go, oh hey, how you? Some people wanted to take pictures. Now it may feel uncomfortable because they want to take pictures with the Asian guys
They've
because they were outside of the thing. But other than that,
they've never been to Hawaii, have you? Because it's the opposite. All the Asians want to take pictures with white folks. It's funny.
well, so the whole town, every
Mhm.
little place they sat down and eat, every interaction with people, communications and whatnot and this and that. Everybody was freaking great. They even invited another dude did the same thing with the same town, and they invited him to see the mayor. The mayor says, "I'm so glad you're here because we've got a lot of heat going on. Could you please go ahead and let the people know?" and
Well,
but
see,
but that's the point, that pressure. So that's the good thing about America, that you have that leeway where influence and whatnot. So that
that's what I mean when I say people are people. That's one of the things I mean.
yeah,
Because it's real easy for somebody else who has never been there to sit back and say this city is racist.
and that's a
So
tough thing to
all
say.
of the people here, this is the most racist city in the
The
United
most,
States.
the
So
most.
so let's go check it out and let's try to start a fight and fail.
Yeah, no,
Everybody is nice. That's what I mean. People are
yeah,
people, and people will do things online. They'll type nasty things in comments or type nasty posts online that they would never even consider breathing to another human being face to face. They would never think about doing it face to face, but they'll type some.
right,
You know.
right. I do want to go to the beginning just to make one thing clear. It's not about the Vikings. A lot of people that don't sort of separate the information out and look at it in a little bit
Mhm.
more of a laid back way would think that the threat is that they're saying that it's that Vikings were now um Spanish people, but that's not the case at all. What it is, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
what it means is that through the long lens of history,
Mhm.
groups prior to
Mhm.
the advent of the languages we speak now, in terms of like, well, not necessarily, well, that's not necessarily true because they came after the Romans. So but anyways, those people were anciently a mixture of people that are found in
Yeah.
different parts of Europe.
Absolutely.
That's not a threat to anything, but people today may, some of them, take it to mean that it's the stealing of a culture or something like that, and they get offended and stuff and this and that. Although
Well,
the professor did have
mhm.
more specific
I,
issues with his team.
that case notwithstanding, the people who basically got all bent out of shape because they think now their culture is going to change.
Mm-hmm.
I think those folks notwithstanding, I think the majority of Europe handles this kind of thing better than America does.
I would assume. Oh, then America. That's an interesting thing.
Because I think you're right. There is still a percentage of people here who see somebody coming from Vietnam and not learning the language. Some people see that as a threat, as evidenced
Mhm.
by the lady yelling at the guy.
As an example, yeah.
Yeah, as an example. Whereas if somebody moves to Germany and their children are raised German, they're German.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You know, same with France. You speak La Belle Francais,
Mm-hmm.
and you're basically French.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody, of course, but I think as a population, as a general population, they tend to handle that thing a little bit easier than America does. We still have a
Baggage.
higher percentage. Well, yes, we have baggage big time, but we still have a higher percentage of people who perceive such things as a threat.
Yeah.
That it's gonna ruin our cities. Well, maybe it'll clean our cities up. You don't know who's coming over. I mean, the person who finds the cure for cancer may be one of those immigrants. Stranger things have happened, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, um, Steve Coombs says they're only able to view people as minorities because they emphasize our differences while never speaking to our similarities, when in fact we have more in common than not. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's that constant without becoming political, and I'm walking a very fine line here. It's that keeping us fighting with one another so that they can keep going to the bank. You know, if so long as we are distracted.
But who are the we though in this scenario?
The population.
Okay,
Population,
so
the general population. Yes,
we do it to ourselves.
Exactly, by buying into it.
Well, it's we but at the same time, it's self-justifying. The problem with it is exactly what you're saying. The problem is that you have to have some sort of culture.
Yes,
because it's outside of your control, because you have family members and cousins and a society and a sister, and so that develops certain little ways. But at the same time, you have to recognize that we're not animals and we have to treat other people. But not everybody's on the same level.
Understood.
So it's a complicated
it's never but what it is it's like a scar. It's a sore that won't heal because we won't leave it alone.
I think it's an impossible thing to heal.
And they don't want us to leave it alone. They want us to keep picking at that sore, because as long as we keep fighting with one another, we're not watching them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Look at my right hand. Keep paying attention to my right hand so you don't see what the left one's doing. And it's reaching around behind you to lift your wallet. No. Look at the right hand. Don't look at the left hand. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We got to keep fighting with one another. And if it's not about culture, it's about sex. And if it's not about sex, it's about economic classes. And if it's not about that, we go back to culture.
Well, people are never satisfied either.
No, well, there's a lot of that.
I mean, and I'm including my, like, I'm a human being in this world and susceptible to all the things that any other human being are susceptible to.
You should see my Amazon wish list.
Now, I will tell you, one of a huge threat for a lot of people, especially when and I've seen this, I have a lot of examples throughout my life. When folks from other parts of the country come to Miami, way different than what you would expect in California, Southern California, LA and stuff, the Spanish influence that you may see sprinkled there in a very obvious way. Over here, it's pedal to the metal. They make no bones about it. They're unbendable in terms of they basically, and that's not 100% true, but in terms of the idea of someone coming and saying, "Hey, you speak this and that," it's been tried, but there's too much of a cultural. The problem is we're too close to the Caribbean and to Cuba, and the influence of what Cubans. So Cubans basically are very in those unbendable, but that's not 100% true, because as time goes on, the children of those, like myself, have no other recourse, but we absorb the country that we're born in. It's our country.
Well,
so in a real sense, you said that we're a young country earlier on, and that we have no culture.
Relatively speaking, yes.
In a relative sense, but in a real tangible way, my position in this life, by coming from ancestry of a different world recently, and yet absorbing the culture here that we're all familiar with, I would say throughout the 20th century, very important from birth. I wasn't denied that. I mean, and you couldn't be denied that. It was encouraged, and it just happened. It's because you are from where. So in one generation, you could have a person that speaks like me, has the reference points like me, is completely American like me, not only by birth but mentality, and yet I have an extra thing inside here that has a view of the outside in a very specific way. And due to that, it's a melding of cultures in a way at the same
time. And that brings about an interesting question, but interesting to me anyway, but I have a brief aside. An extreme example of that. Have you ever heard of a comedian by the name of Henry Cho?
I've not. No.
This goes way back to Johnny Carson. Okay. I
Okay.
saw him on the Johnny Carson show. The dude is hilarious. Um, his mother and father came over from Korea. He
Okay.
was born here. And for some reason, they settled in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Nice.
And he was born in Chattanooga.
Mhm.
And he sounds so
Oh,
hillbilly
I have seen
heavy.
him. I have seen him.
His first words, he come out the first time I ever saw him on TV. He says, "All right, y'all just go ahead and stand there and take this in for a little bit. Go ahead on, go ahead on. I'm used to it. Hey, hey, that Asian guy's talking like a hillbilly." And then he explains his story. His parents came from Korea. He was raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee,
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
make fun of the way he talks, but that's okay because y'all look alike to me.
I have
And
seen that. I have seen
he
that.
is flipping hilarious. I mean, that's not what his act is about, but
It's
that's
like
just the
breaking.
opener. It's the icebreaker.
Doesn't it break the reality or the?
It does. It completely explodes it because his father's Korean, his mother's Korean. They go back centuries, but he was born and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it's a disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you close your eyes, you could just see Carnival written all over this guy. Carnival ride operator.
Yeah.
Give me your ticket and get on this big son of a gun.
Yeah. It's a reality. It's like a matrix mess up. Because we
Yeah.
expect certain norms. Yeah.
But and that kind of makes me wonder, well, okay, that's an exploding of that reality right there.
Mhm.
Don't you feel kind of foolish, Mark? Well, yeah, but you go into every situation with a preconceived notion, so why should this one have been any different?
Yeah.
But yeah, now the question I had that I think is interesting to me anyway. Um, we're talking about along this line. Let's say you have a child.
Mhm.
Would you teach your child how to speak Spanish or to read and write Spanish as well as English?
Yeah. I would try. See, because I would definitely try so that
Mhm.
he'd have a little bit of that. But at this point, it's a different. So my what is it? The words I can pick out and use, and combinations of words that I can use um,
Mhm.
fluently,
Mhm.
properly, or let's correct the properly, more or less decent, where I can
Mhm.
hang my, because no, I mean properly is a big
Right.
order. It's a tall order.
I don't even pretend that I speak proper English.
Well,
So,
because once you cross that Rubicon, you're
yeah.
gonna you no longer self doubt yourself, and then all of a sudden you can create all sorts of. So um, it would be easier for me to obviously it's gonna be English is gonna be would be a given, but would
Mhm.
I give this I would try in little ways so that there's at least um a connection to what his grandfather and great grandfather and this I would try that. Kind
Mhm.
of like the Italians do. You know how they speak one word of Italian, then it's all English here
Yeah.
in America.
Yeah. And people in Italy go, they're not speaking Italian,
Yeah,
you know.
but to the Italian here,
Mhm.
they're quite that's a
Exactly.
derivative of an Italian influx into the United States, and then
Mhm.
keeping certain words that tie
Mhm.
them together.
Well, it's like people from France will say that people in Quebec or Cajuns aren't speaking French. There's it's hard to understand them because it's not the same French. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a derivative of French, but it's not la belle français.
Right.
Le grand français. Excuse me. Jim Dockerel says there are Asian people who have immigrated to Mexico and speak Spanish.
Hmm.
True, but also into South America. There was a huge influx of Asians into South America. And as a matter of fact, from 1990 to November of 2000, the president of Peru was a guy by the name of Alberto Fujimori. There is a huge, there you go. Don't forget Alberto Fujimori. Yeah. I mean, people are people. They're going to go where they want to go when they want
There's
to
a
go there.
huge influence of that in Peru.
Yeah. Believe it or not, down on the coast of Chile, there is a large Polynesian influence there. And they've done DNA analysis, and sure enough, there's a heavy concentration of Polynesian in some of the coastal areas in Chile.
It's a very weird thing. We're on the cuffs of, for those that haven't embarked on that journey, and there's literature that enriches, like if you, the DNA thing is a certain thing, and in the beginning I used to think, oh look, I'm this percent French, what the heck is that all about? Oh look, what is this with the Irish? Do I have a, but what's cool for me through my little journey is because honestly, it's the addition of reading, not knowing why these things are popping up, and reading general history about areas and seeing connections on a historical note, and growing my own understanding of certain areas. It's really helped me understand the lay of the land in a small way. There's so much, it's impossible to take it all in. There's too much. There's way too much history to take it all in.
But I think it's fairly safe to say that we can draw the conclusion that there is no such thing as racial purity.
Genetically speaking, there's experts,
no such thing.
Yeah, the people that do the DNA analysis, they can't find, because one of the things is the idea of something telling you that you're, I don't know, British or Scandinavian or like Spanish or like whatever.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says it, but at the same time, the problem is that it does say it, but not because of race. It's just, if you have a set combination that have been propagated because people in your area have been mixing with each other for a long time, there's combination letters that are present there that are the same. They're the same letters everywhere. It's just that your specific little lock combination, which does influence genes, and on all sorts. I mean, so there's, but the idea of, here's a group of Scandinavian people and they're locked in, and then something else happened over there, and we're us and those are them. At one level, yes, those are you and those are them, but at a broader level, you and them are the same people back in time.
Now we're Americans and Canadians and Mexicans. But when you go further back, the difference is not so distinct.
Well, for the indigenous people.
Right.
Or are you talking about modern? Because
I'm talking about modern. Right now, today, we're Canadian.
It's Mexico, United States, and Canada.
Right. Yeah. But if we go back before there was a Canada, before there was a United States of America, and before there was a Mexico, our ancestors, if we follow our ancestral trails back.
They go back.
Yeah. So basically, we're all mutts. There ain't a purebred among us.
No, there isn't, but it's not something that would be digestible, because there are visual differences in people.
Right. Well, and sure.
But because of that, people will say, well, this is one group and that's one group and the other, and you can't. Well, it's complicated. It's complicated because people want to believe that they belong to just this group, and they're right to a degree and they're wrong to another degree.
When you're talking cultures, yes, that's 100% legitimate. Yeah. That's 100% legitimate, because the Canadian culture is as different from American culture as American culture is different from Mexican culture. They're just different.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the idea of like cultures. I mean, but the idea of it's a complicated. Long story short, there are differences in people that you can visually see, and that's the biggest one that helps people progress into thinking that they belong to a certain race or this or that.
Yeah.
but it also depends on what the definition of race is, you know. So it's a difficult thing. So we're all from different places, and there's differences, but at the same time, inevitably, it's all, there is no such thing as this group appeared over here and they're nothing to do with the fear is always the major fear, which we've
Yeah,
talked about it.
is the
It's the original continent thing.
yeah.
People fear that because it's like, whoa,
And
what?
that
No,
is
no, no,
so
no.
damn dumb. It really is. That is so damn dumb. I think I know you have gathered all kinds of information about your family,
Mhm,
about you, and about your relatives, and you
mhm,
have made connections that you never would have been able to make
mhm.
without doing all this.
Yeah,
And you've really been on an adventure. You really have for the last couple of years
I
about
have,
this.
I have.
And it almost seems like I'm trying to insult you, and I'm not, when I say what I'm taking out of all of this is
Mhm.
we're all basically the same. Quit, don't act like a jerk and mind your own business. That's
Well,
my takeaway from all of this is be a decent human being because
mhm.
we're not as different as others might want to try to make
Yeah,
us.
on a moral level, I think that we would not need to study necessarily these things that I've been studying for us to arrive at that. I had that conclusion, and I believe that you as well, according to all the things we talk about. Um, because our parents taught us one way. Now, this isn't a perfect world, and people have bias, but that's one
Sure.
thing and another. But I think that it doesn't require us discovering that we're so. I hate to say this is a horrible comparison, but I even look at animals with, like, if I see a little bird on a tree, I think that's a bird and on the tree. Now, if I'm hungry, if I'm hungry and I'm a wilderness guy, you know, that bird becomes lunch. But
Exactly.
the point is that it's not a far stretch to have some sort of dignity towards others and respect towards others,
Sure.
regardless of knowing whether or not they belong to your tribe or not.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is when it comes to that tribe, check your pride a little bit. Check your pride a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
because
Sorry. I
I
just
just, you know what?
what?
The older I get,
Mhm.
the longer it takes to flip through that Rolodex up here and go, that was a joke. I get it now. You
Yeah.
know, it just kind of
I love it. I love it
it's
though. I love it.
I call it the little man with the hammer. It's
Hey,
like he's up there in your brain and he's tapping his toe. Okay, I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Is he
but
ready? No, he's not ready yet. Okay, now he's ready. Wham! Okay, now boing, I got it.
but
Okay.
that association of that word, check your pride or your pride and stuff,
Mhm.
that's not something necessary. Or maybe I'm wrong. You tell me. You know, and you guys out there know. Um, but a lot of people out there, I would bet, wouldn't make the associate. They don't have what we were saying from the beginning, that connection to that word. Or am I wrong? I could be wrong.
I don't know. I really don't know because here we get into this two guys from two different backgrounds and two different sides of the continent.
Hmm.
Maybe where you are, that is taken a little bit more along those lines, and out here, it isn't. I don't
Wait a
know.
second, but you knew exactly. You've never heard that
Oh, that's
saying?
why it took me a little bit to get the joke.
Okay.
That's why it took me a little bit. I went, okay, made the association, and
Right.
then there was a clunk, and I started laughing.
Yeah, it's well, look, language is also another barrier as to
But
what you
yes,
were
check that
saying.
too. By the way, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a few barriers between people, and it is, you're right. It's don't be a jerk, and but that moral conclusion, it doesn't require any other outside, unless you've been beat like a redheaded dog all your life, and you're just attacking the wall because you're angry at life. I think fairly, it's not a stretch to be decent, to regardless of like weirdness that you might
But
associate.
you can be decent to people one on one, especially if you work with the public. You know how to
That is
be
a point.
civil and you know
Yeah.
how to be decent to people one on one. But you and I both know people who were raised in certain regions in certain areas where there's a
Hmm.
certain form of groupthink
Hmm.
towards other people, other foods, other
Hmm.
cultures, other anything, that if it's not theirs, it's
Hmm.
somehow it's whoa, that's I don't know nothing about that. Stay away from it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean they're bad people. It
No.
just means that there's a little bit of ignorance there in that they and I
No.
say ignorance in that they just don't know.
Yeah. No. It's a normal
So
human thing.
so um it uh, basically, yes, we all know be civil to people and mind your own business, but now we really got to put it into action. And because I think I've made this statement before and I have no way to quantify it,
Hmm.
but I think fully two-thirds of the world's problems
It's
could
stupidity.
would just disappear if people would mind their own business.
We can't do that though, because that's a hard one, because people are.
You know, well, look at that guy. He parked crooked in the parking spot. Mind your own business. You don't
We're
know his
critical.
story. You don't know what's going on.
Dude, it's normal to be critical too. That's another
Yeah,
problem. Yeah. Yeah.
but
It's
is it bothering you? You got a parking spot. What do you care? He's wearing red flip flops. What do you care? Mind your own business. He's
I
speaking
mean,
Spanish to his mother in the middle of Denny's. Mind your own business. What do you care? He ain't talking to you. You
yeah,
know,
I mean, I I guess it's an unsolvable thing. It's on each person to navigate this world as they so choose, and they get the hits and whatnot that occurs from their actions and behaviors and whatnot.
and here is one of the hot button issues of the day. Frankie CNC and Woodworking Channel says some people don't like pineapple on pizza. Now,
Hmm.
I know this has started a lot of internet rock fights, but we here at Trampled Underfoot podcast, I won't say that we never shy away from the tough issues, but I think a little bit of controversy is good. And you know me, I'd like to have unpopular opinions, and I'll say it straight up. I love pineapple on pizza.
I'm with you on that. Well, I don't want to say I love.
Not every pizza,
Right?
but
Yeah,
one of my favorites is Canadian bacon and pineapple.
I like anchovies on my pizza. Not a lot, but in a few.
And on certain pizzas, I like anchovies as
I,
well.
I have zero problem tasting different food. Well, unless the food
Hmm.
is stomach,
Hmm.
tongue, or intestine. And intestine, it depends on if it's a sausage or a certain thing that's specific to the blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
sausage casing. Yeah.
But I don't like
Well,
stomach.
there are certain things that I don't like either. I don't like liver. I'm just not much. I don't like kidney. I just don't like the flavor. But those are legitimate things. I'm going to stir the pot even further. Y'all people that don't like peeps, good. That's more for me at the store.
I would never, and I would never do what you've done just now and gone out and purchased untraditional peep shapes. I would only purchase the yellow and the pink.
I love them. And I don't care if it's in the shape of a skull. I don't care if it's in the shape of a snowman. I don't care. I don't care if it's in the shape of a Christmas tree or a chickie or a bunny. I'll
But
eat the heck out of that son of a gun.
do they still come in the little rows, the two rows in the
Yes.
box? Dude, that was such a thrill as a kid.
Yeah.
And you couldn't eat just
Marshmallow
one.
peeps. Yep.
I could run through that box, dude.
Yep.
I don't know how our parents would let us, dude, because that's a
Well,
truckload of freaking
see,
sugar was thought of as a fruit.
just about. Well, we never got it so bad here in America, but like overseas in Europe, sugar was rationed
That's
during
right.
the war, during World War II, and to the point to where it was almost non-existent, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So when a lot of people think, let's just say in the UK, for example, a lot of people think, okay, the World War II is over in 1945, so sugar rationing is done. No, they still had to build up. They had to rebuild basically the UK. Half of London was gone and bombed, you know. Well, not quite half, but you get my point.
It was destroyed.
Sugar rationing was there until 1952.
Mm-hmm. My
And
great uncle sent sugar from his what you call mills in
mhm,
Cuba to a Scottish village,
yeah,
and there's a paper article on it.
yeah, that's a prime example.
Yeah,
So sugar was not just a luxury, it was made of unobtainium. So
yeah,
when the rationing ended and there was enough to go around, people would stop just shy of taking their kid out in the middle of the street and dumping a 1 pound box of sugar down their throat just to show the neighbors that they had it, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So it was not seen as the bad thing now that it
Right.
is now. But yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
I grew up on these things. I will continue to eat these things. And I know a lot of people hate them. Good. Hate
Oh,
them.
they're so great. I haven't had one in a
Love
long
them.
time, but it's such. At least as a kid, I can't have the sweets nowadays. But whatever. It's a good. As a kid, it's awesome.
I'm going to make Steve laugh again. I'm sitting here right now looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 different candies, 4 different types of candies. And Steve is going, only 4? Lightweight. But that's what I was saying before in the green room before we came on. I've got to knock it off with the junk food, but I don't want to. So there, I said it, and I'm glad. Um, Frankie says, let them age and make s'mores. I was going to suggest that if you can, if you're the type of person who can leave them alone, the chickies work better than the bunnies. The little chickies, let them age until summertime and get a little bit firm, put them on a skewer and roast them over a campfire. They're even better than regular roasted marshmallows. I'm here to tell you. Chef's kiss.
Nice.
Yeah. Steve says I can see 11 without moving from my desk. And you didn't have to bend over, did you?
I mean, candy boy.
Jim Dockrell says my mom came from Britain in 1945 and was amazed at the amount and variety of food here. Yeah. I mean, Canada and the US, it didn't get nearly as bad as it was in Europe. I mean, things were just rationed and there just was none, you know, because everything had to be shipped in. And with submarines, torpedo, and all of the shipping, some things just didn't make it.
That's an interesting thing. I didn't know. I thought that Jim was. I mean, I didn't know either way, but I knowing that his mom came from England, and I guess then him and whoever his siblings are, then so he has that old world connection in a recent time. That's an interesting. It gives a certain perspective, I would assume.
Yeah.
It does for me in very obvious ways. I would imagine for him as well.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're okay. Aging marshmallow chickies will never happen around here. Well, you got to admit, I got these over a week ago, so I haven't been too awful bad.
Well, look, I'm not gonna like shoot down your whatchamacallit. It is curious that they're little snowmen. I've never seen the snowmen. All I remember is either the bunnies or the
Mm-hmm.
little, I guess, ducks or chickens
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Those
Rabbits
were the
and chicks.
two
Yeah.
styles that I
Mm-hmm.
was, and to me, the official ones were always little ducks or whatnot.
Yeah. The little chicks, and that's where they got their name, Peep, because it looked like a
Okay,
little chick.
yeah, those were the
And
official ones for me.
yes, I agree. And then along came the bunnies. And they started branching away from the yellow, and I never understood yellow or pink bunnies, but whatever. I didn't understand pink chickens either. So
It
what
made
do you know?
sense to me.
Yeah, well, Easter colors. That's what it was all about.
Yeah.
And then they started with purple ones,
Oh
and
yeah,
then they started doing sour ones.
that I don't remember.
And now they're all over the spectrum. They have bubblegum flavor. They have chocolate peeps. They have all kinds of different things. So the wonderful world of marshmallow peeps is an ever growing one.
Sometimes you can find them even outside of season.
Yeah, and those have been properly aged for roasting. Well, it's been almost 2 hours. You about ready to land the plane?
Okay. Um, this is another topic which sparks a lot of conversation because it can be something as simple as candy variations to
Mhm.
include chewing gums and whatnot. I mean,
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Well, we went there and it all started with, Frankie saying, yeah, some people don't like pineapple on pizza. Well, they can mind their own business. If I want to have pineapple on my pizza, I'll do it. And on that, I answer to them. So there.
I don't see a problem with it. I don't understand. I mean, I guess people are very hard up with what they accept and don't accept on a
Yeah.
pizza, but I don't see it as a Hawaiian pizza, dude. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Pineapple on pizza is an abomination. Oh, bite me.
Well, some people don't like
Get a
pineapple for some reason.
personality, will you?
Or maybe they're just saying that to go with the flow, dude.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
Because if they were on a deserted island,
Mm-hmm.
if they were on a deserted island and all they had was a delicious hot piping pizza with frickin' and then
They'd
somebody will
be,
say, "Well, I'll pluck the pineapples out of it."
yeah, they'd be all over it. They'd be
Yeah,
all over it. So
this is the best pizza I've ever had.
that's
I mean,
right.
yeah. So,
Okay, we need to go ahead and end this.
all right, all right. Well, so look, nothing. We talk about all different types of stuff on each and every episode,
Yeah.
and what can you do? It's why we're here. We go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time, and we have our channel right here on YouTube, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. We also have a Facebook page, and I think I'm going to look for that one video that I think it's. If you guys are interested, I'll post it over there. So you could look at the Scandinavian Norwegian dude talking to the other dude, which I think was from Sweden or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but they sit there and talk, and it's a great video. We also have a website where you can catch your past episodes. It's called trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and we are sponsored by
Harneil Media, your web source. Look, if you're looking to legitimize, expand, or just get an online presence, look no further than Harneil Media. They are website designers, they are personalized service. Steve Nealon is out here in the chat with us. He's a friend, he's a good guy. They do an excellent job. I highly endorse him. I can't say enough good about him. And when you talk to Harneil Media, you're talking with Steve. So reach out to him, tell him about your ideas, tell him what you'd like as far as a website is concerned, and he can hook you right up. He can fix you right up. I'm here to tell you. He's done it for us, he's done it for me. Harneil Media, that's HARNEAL media.com, the sponsor of Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com.
and in Spanish it's harneilmedia.com.
Punto.
Boom. Yeah, punto point.
Okay. In German, it's punkt.
They all start with P.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, guys, enjoy. Listen, be safe. Be safe. Enjoy the rest of your week and be happy. Look for. Well, hold on. Let me back up with that. I'm not your emotional guide through this life.
I
You
am.
know,
I am.
you know what to do. You know what to do. I'm not gonna throw it. Well, I mean, a polite person would offer that gift. So I am going to offer it. Be happy, enjoy yourselves, and don't worry about the junk that piles up, because you know what, it'll be there. It may or may not be there. Either way, it's your life. Enjoy yourselves, and we wish you good things. Any final words, Mark?
Yes. Be nice to one another. Keep your hands to yourself. Mind your own business. And leave other people's things alone.
Rock
There.
and roll. We'll catch you next time. See ya.
Peace.
I don't know.